talk about soy and phytoestrogens and whether the concern regarding feminization, low testosterone, increased risk of breast cancer, and all kinds of other concerns are valid or not. I'm Dr. Gili. I'm a practicing internal medicine physician as well as a nutritionist, and today I'm going to present to you a couple of illustrations. One of them at the end I hope will make you laugh, but also will help you understand this issue and hopefully help you feel at ease when you enjoy soy and soy products. First of all, it is absolutely true that soybeans and soy products contain phytoestrogens. There's a whole class of these products called isoflavones, genistein, daidzein, and others. And it's also true that these compounds have a chemical structure that is quite similar to that of the estrogen, as I try to illustrate through this image here. This is the basic structure of the isoflavones, and this is the chemical structure of the estrogen molecule. And in the case of soy, there are three isoflavones, three phytosterols that are of concern, as I mentioned earlier. So how is it possible not to be concerned when you have these phytoestrogens similar enough to be able to bind the estrogen receptors in all our tissues, and at the same time people like me, allergists, to come out and say, you know what, there is no concern there, go ahead and eat as much soybean and soy products as you want? Isn't that a contradiction? And I totally understand this. I keep hearing this from a lot of my patients, and I see it on social media all over the place. Here is two ways to look at this that will hopefully help you understand why that is not a contradiction. First of all, I think it will be immensely helpful to discuss the concept of partial agonists. This is a pharmacological concept, and don't be afraid, it's not going to be very technical, but it's essential that you understand how these things work in order to grasp what I'm getting at. So here in this graph, on the vertical axis, you have the response in percentages from 0 to 100%, and on the horizontal axis here, you have the dose of the hormone, estrogen, or the partial agonist, or of both at any given concentration. As the amount or the concentration of estrogen increases, you get more and more of the effect. But these things don't go on forever. There are mechanisms built by design in our body that make it so that after a certain amount, the effect becomes 100% and it doesn't go higher than that. It stays the same, no matter how much more you increase the amount of that hormone or substance. And the same is true for the phytoestrogen. Let's say we're looking at daidzein. You increase the amount you eat and you get more and more of that estrogen-like effect. But what do you notice? You hit the plateau, you hit 100% of the effect at a certain concentration of those phytosterols. But there is a significant difference here between how much effect you get from the estrogen and how much effect you get from the partial agonist, from the phytosterol. That's why they are called partial agonists, meaning that you get the effect, but you only get part of it. In this illustration, about 60 or 70% of that effect, right? What that means is that yes, you do get an estrogen-like effect, but it's significantly smaller. And in doing so, you manage to get the benefits, but for the most part, you avoid the negatives of higher, stronger, more potent estrogen effects in the body. The other part that's equally important in this discussion is what happens when you have both the partial agonists, when you eat both soy products and your estrogen, your body's estrogen goes up. This may be a particular concern for women, fearing that if they eat too much soy products, that in addition to their own estrogen is going to blow the concentration to the roof and breast cancer is going to happen in no time. Here's why that is not the case. As your or somebody's estrogen receptors in the body get saturated in good part by these partial agonists that binds to them, when the actual estrogen comes along, it finds less receptors to bind to, and therefore you need a higher concentration of that estrogen for the same effect that you would get with estrogen alone. And yes, with higher and higher and higher concentration, you may be able to reach the maximum effect of the estrogen, but it will take a significantly more estrogen, you see here, to do that if you had the soy products in the system than if you didn't. So even though it may seem contradictory or paradoxical, it actually helps to have soy products in the system because you delay and you partially block the effect of the actual estrogen. This is described in the literature as both estrogen-like effect, even though it's milder, as well as an anti-estrogen-like effect at the same time. And again, it seems like a contradiction. How can you have both the effect and the opposite effect from the one product at the same time? But this is how that happens, and I hope that makes sense. Let me know in the comment section below if it didn't, and I'll try to explain perhaps even better. Okay, now this is a nice theory, you may think, but what are the studies showing? Is this playing out in the real world? Yes, it is. Like if you look at this study published a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, in 2020, these folks looked exactly at the effect of soy isoflavones and the male reproductive hormones. So this is a meta-analysis of over 41 studies through the last decade looking at this issue. And what's the conclusion? The conclusion is that regardless of the dose or study duration, neither soy protein nor isoflavone exposure affects the total testosterone, free testosterone, estrogen levels in man. And I have another illustration to try to drive home this point. I'm sure that many of you recognize John Wayne here, and you remember those Western films and many other films in which blank cartridges are used to allow the characters, the actors, to portray fights, even war movies and so forth. And you get caught up in that excitement. You hear the noise of the gun going off. You see the flame coming out. You see the effect of the bullet and all of that. But in reality, you actually have blanks and nobody's really hurt, right? Well, in a very similar way, phytoestrogens are like hormonal blank cartridges. They bind on the receptors, they create the excitement, you get the benefit, you get the good part of it, you know, enjoying the movie, right? And yet nobody gets hurt at the end of it all. Now, when you watch a movie, you know, you get scared sometimes. You feel like, oh, maybe my favorite character is going to get killed. But again, at the end of it all, we all know that nobody got hurt in that movie unless there was some freak accident or something like that, right? In the same manner, you see in the real world a lot of concern, a lot of noise about the bad effects of these phytoestrogens and how they can damage your testosterone, how can, you know, they may risk, if you eat too much of it, men can risk growing breasts and low testosterone, all of that stuff. But when you look at the real data, what you see is that nobody really gets hurt. Now, I hope this helped you. Let me know in the comment section if it did or if you have any questions. Till next time, you stay healthy, my friend.